Hey, good morning. This story is about Dinah, or Dinah, Dinah. And have you heard of her? She's in the Bible. Jacob's daughter. Yeah, Jacob had a bunch of boys and a daughter. So I've compiled all this information on my website, where science meets religion, .blogspot.com. Now, Dinah's only in there in Genesis 30 and Genesis 34. And also, she was raped in there by a prince. Dinah is the daughter of Leah. Jacob had, 4 baby mamas. Leah was the first one. It wasn't the woman he loved, okay? But he was scammed by their dad into taking that one and then the other one that he did love. Anyway, I'm going to read you Genesis 30, which is a fun story. The day that Rachel sold Jacob's dick for food stamps. Okay, this is Genesis 30. When Rachel, that was the girl that he loved, saw that she had no children, she envied her sister, who had already had, the boys, some of them. And she said to Jacob, "Give me children or else I die." And Jacob was mad. He was at her and he said, "Look, am I in God's stead? Who has withheld from thee the fruit of the womb?" And she said, "Behold, go into the maid, the slave girl, Bilhah, and give her a baby that I can take care of it." So she gave Jacob this girl, Bilhah, and Jacob went into her, and Bilhah conceived, and she bore a son. And Rachel said, "God has judged me, and has also heard my voice, and he has given me a son," and therefore they called his name Dan. And this Bilhah, Rachel's maid, she had a second son, and Rachel was, "Great wrestlings have I wrestled with my sister, and I have prevailed," and she called that one's name Naphtali. And then Leah, that was the first wife, she saw that she stopped getting pregnant, and so she took her maid, Zilpah, and gave it to Jacob. And Leah said, "A troop cometh," and she called his name Gad. And Zilpah, this Leah's maid, bore him a second son. And Leah said, "Happy am I, for the daughters will call me blessed." And she called his name Asher. And then Reuben went in the days of the wheat harvest, and he found mandrakes in the field, which is, I looked that up, it's kind of like oranges, a food stamp item. Anyway, he brought them to his mother Leah, and Rachel said to Leah, "Give me some of those mandrakes." And she said unto her, "Is it a small matter that thou hast taken my husband, that thou wouldest take away my son's mandrakes also?" Because Leah, wanted the D, but Jacob wanted to give it to Rachel. So Rachel said, "Therefore, Jacob will lie with you tonight. He's going to sleep in your bed tonight if you give me some of this fruit that your son brought." So Jacob came out of the field, and Leah went out to meet him and said, "Thou must come into me tonight. I have hired thee with my son's oranges, mandrakes." And so Jacob went home with her that night, and God hearkened unto Leah, and she conceived and bare Jacob a 5th son. And Leah said, "God has given me my hire, because I have given my maiden to my husband." And she called his name Issachar. And Leah conceived again and bare Jacob a 6th son. And Leah said, "God has endued me with a good dowry. Now will my husband dwell with me, because I've borne him 6 sons." And she called him Zerubbabel. And afterwards she bore also a daughter and called her name Dinah. Okay, and now that was Genesis 30. Now, Genesis 34 is the next time she's in there. It's called the rape of Dinah. Dinah was the daughter whom Leah had borne to Jacob. She went out to visit some of the women of the land when Shechem, the son of Hamor the Hivite, the leader of the region, saw her, and he seized her and laid with her by force. He was strongly attracted to Dinah, the daughter of Jacob. He was in love with the woman. He spoke affectionately to her. Shechem said to his father Hamor, "Get me this young woman for a wife." Meanwhile, Jacob heard that Shechem had defiled his daughter Dinah. And his sons, but since his sons were out in the field with his livestock, Jacob just kept quiet until they came home. Now, Hamor, the father of Shechem, went out to discuss the matter with Jacob. And just as Jacob's sons were coming in from the field, and when they heard the news, that Dinah was raped by this prince, the men were extremely angry, indignant, and Shechem had committed an outrage in Israel by lying with Jacob's daughter. Such a thing is not done. And Hamor appealed to them, saying, "My son Shechem, he has his heart set on your daughter. Please give her to him as a wife. Intermarry with us. Give your daughters to us, and take our daughters for yourselves. Thus you can live among us. The land is open before you. Settle and move freely in it and acquire the holdings here." And Shechem appealed to Dinah's father and her brothers, "Please do me this favor. Whatever you ask me, I'm going to give you. No matter how high you set the bridal price, I will give you whatever you ask. Just please give me Dinah, this young woman, as my wife." Now, this part of the story I call the smelly circumcision, okay, because it was dirty. But whatever. Anyway, this is still verse 13, the revenge of Jacob's sons against the one person raped their sister, but this revenge was taken out on the whole town. Anyway, Jacob's sons replied to Shechem as his father Hamor, with guile, speaking as they did, because they defiled their sister Dinah. And they said to him, "We're not able to do this thing to give our sister to an uncircumcised man, for that would be a disgrace. Only on this condition will we agree that you become like us, having every male among you circumcised. Then we'll give you our daughters and take your daughters in marriage, and we'll settle among you and become one people. But if you don't listen to us and be circumcised, then we're just going to take Dinah and our daughters and go home." And their proposal pleased Hamor and his son. And the young man, they lost no time in acting on the proposal, since he wanted Jacob's daughter. They were all ready to cut off a piece of their dick, to get this girl. Anyway, so now he was more highly regarded than anyone else in the father's house. So Hamor and his son Shechem, they went to the gate of the city and said to the men of the city, "These men are friendly towards us. Let them settle in the land and move in freely. There's ample room in the land for them, and we can take their daughters in marriage and give our daughters to them, but only on this condition will the men agree to live with us and form one people with us. And that is that if every male among us be circumcised as they are, would not their livestock and their property and all the animals be ours? Let's just agree with them to cut off a piece of our dick so they'll live among us." So all who went out of the gate of the city listened to Hamor and his son Shechem, and all the males and all those who went out of the city gate were circumcised. On the third day, they were still in pain. Okay, this was grown-ass men. 3 days later, still in pain. And 2 of Jacob's sons, Simeon and Levi, these were the brothers of Dinah, they took their sword, they advanced against their unsuspecting city and massacred them all, because they couldn't move, because they were in so much pain. 3 days later, it's a very, very painful process, okay? and you should not do it to unconsenting people. The 8th day circumcision is a covenant, but anything other than that 8th day is just not medically necessary. Insurance fraud, waste, and abuse. Anyway, line 26. So they killed Hammer and his son Sheshem with the sword, and they took Dinah out of Sheshem's house, and they left.